Hi, I'm Eugenia Gamble, author of Tending the Wild Garden, and I'm grateful that you're spending a few minutes with me today as you prepare to study Chapter 6, Spirit Kindness. A few months ago, I was talking with a young friend who was lamenting a kind of physical and spiritual uneasiness that seemed to be lurking within her. In the course of that conversation, she said something that struck me. What I miss most these days, she said, is kindness. Simple, basic, wonderful, taken for granted human kindness. I know the feeling. In a changed world and in divided times, all of the aspects of spirit can seem to go dormant. They don't, but they can seem to. And the one we may feel the lack of first is kindness. It's such a bedrock quality of human life. Even as toddlers, we are taught to be kind and not slap our playmates or refuse to share or poke at the dog's eyes. There's something in most of us that just knows that we're supposed to be kind, to be nice, to be decent. So when that becomes harder, or we see its value diminish in society, we become restless, knowing that we have somehow lost something fundamental in our lives. Now, is that what the Apostle Paul means when he speaks of spirit kindness at work in us? Well, sort of. The Greek word that Paul uses here and that we translate as kindness is in other places in the New Testament translated as goodness. It's similar to the word that we'll consider in the next chapter that we translate as goodness or generosity. The word that we're pondering this week refers not just to being sweet and not hurting people's feelings when we could, or especially when we think they have it coming. It is a much more substantial concept than that. It means to be gracious from a centered heart. It means to find goodness in situations and then to see those in the foreground, even if there is a lot that we don't like or don't want to look at in the background. It means to consistently display integrity. And it means to be drawn to excellence in personal behavior and to be quick to support excellence in others. When this word is used in the New Testament, it often means to be benevolently serviceable, especially when it would be easier not to be. And while my young friend was mourning a kind of death of civility in that conversation, I suspect that the Spirit, always strong in her, was leading her to lament something even deeper. The refusal of people to be benevolently serviceable when it would be easier not to be. At the beginning of the pandemic, we saw spirit kindness surge in us. We went out on our balconies and we sang songs and we rang bells to support hospital workers. We gave more to charity. We were scrupulous in trying to protect each other. But as pandemic wore on, and as many of the restrictions were redefined and we became confused, or as the able-bodied of us just wore out with it all and moved on, that sort of spirit kindness seemed to recede. I personally have immune issues, so I still have to mask when I'm out and about. But the kindness that I experienced early is often now replaced with indifference, almost embarrassment or disdain, or with an unwillingness to be inconvenienced for the sake of my weak lungs. I get it. We are tired of it all. We feel things pent up in us, and even benevolently putting aside our comfort for the sake of another has somehow been politicized. So how do we sit humbly with this fundamental aspect of Spirit fruit? How do we tend the soil of our hearts so that Spirit can bring kindness to a rich harvest in days when meanness is disguised as strength and others are seen as expendable? Well, we have to remember that just because we and others are not demonstrating an act of Spirit fruit does not mean that it is not in us and that Spirit is not working the garden of our soul. Spirit begins with a seed. Sometimes all we can do is create an environment for that seed to grow. When we do that, it will, period. I promise you. How can it not? It is who Spirit is. So thinking about all of this, I suggested to my congregation on this past Easter that we enter into a 50-day spiritual kindness project. Each day, I wrote a devotion that invited folk to think about kindness and to choose a lark for the day, a little act of random kindness. Members set up kindness tables at the local farmers market and in the park. They invited passersby to stop and tell a story of kindness received or offered. At first, when they stopped people, they were met with skepticism, but more times than not, people stopped and told stories, often with tears of gratitude at being asked to focus their thoughts in this way. If they chose to do so, they were invited to fill out kindness cards with their stories that we made into a garland, and I want to show it to you. Here's a piece of that kindness garland that we made and displayed in worship. And with their permission, we posted their stories online. We did not ask for any identifying information. It was not a thinly veiled attempt to add to our mailing list. It was simply God's people choosing to invite others to open themselves to Spirit kindness and taste its sweet fruit. It produced a sea change in the energy around the tables and in the congregation. So this week, why not experiment with larks, little acts of random kindness? See what Spirit does and share that with your group. I'd love to hear about it too. See you next week.